Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for attending our, I believe is this our fifth one or our
Yes,
this is our
five.
Okay, so this is our fifth webinar series, Lunch and Learn. The other four were have been recorded, and you can look at them on our website. We had covered construction monitoring, mapping and mobile GIS, wetlands, and photo management. And today we are talking about veg management and taxonomy. We really want to keep these sessions open and focused on any of the tools and techniques that our guest, Shawn, uses to make his work easier. Our audience has been asking to see more of what Wildnote does specifically. So at the end of this half hour, if you'd like to stick around, we will do a short demo of some of our taxonomy features. And also we can ask some questions then. But because we didn't want to be pushing Wildnote too much during the actual learning session, we thought we'd throw that in at the end. So those of you who don't know me, anybody new, welcome, welcome. My name is Kristen Hazard. I am the founder and CEO of Wildnote. And Wildnote is an app built specifically for environmental consultants. We have built this for you. And it's great at data collection, data management, and reporting. And basically, we're trying to automate as much of the manual processes of environmental compliance as possible. And today with me is our Director of Customer Success. She lives to make you happy, and her name is Nancy Douglas. Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you.
All right, and we also have the giveaway champion. She comes in, gives stuff away. Her name is Rini Punzi, and she's a VP of Sales and Strategy. Hi, Rini.
Hey, everybody.
All right. So we're going to introduce Shawn in a second, but for until then, I'd like Nancy to do some housekeeping with y'all.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here. Shawn, thank you so much. I know Kristen will talk more about how awesome you are later, but Shawn was with us at the very beginning of this journey, so it's great to have him with us today. There's two ways to communicate with us during the workshop. The first is via chat, and you'll find the chat icon at the bottom of your Zoom window. Use that for any technical issues, and I'll do my best to help you out. And then if you have questions for the panelists or just general questions to any of us, you can post those in the Q&A session, and we'll work through those throughout the 30 minutes that we're here. And we also have a special section dedicated to that at the end of the segment. Just so you know what to expect, the basic format is that we're going to get a story from Shawn. We call that Stories from the Field. We'll learn how and why they've incorporated technology into their process and problems that they're solving with that. And then Shawn's going to talk about some of his go-to apps, and then we'll open up officially for questions. And as Kristen mentioned, this session, we're going to be doing a little bit of live show and tell for the second half an hour for anyone who wants to stay. And on a final note, since we can only have virtual lunch with you, we are working with Territory Foods to provide meals to frontline healthcare workers, which is more important now than ever. We're donating 1 meal for each workshop attendee, and for every 2 meals, Territory Foods contributes a third, which is cool. So right now, we're up to 259 meals donated, and we get to pick the city. And this episode's city is New Orleans. All right, Kristen, back to you.
All right, fantastic. So Kenneth asked, how can we be sure our microphones aren't on? I believe with this webinar format, all attendees' microphones are just muted by default, so you don't need to worry about that. Okay, so let me introduce Shawn Carrol. Shawn is an Ohio native and received his degree in conservation biology from Arizona State University. His first job after college involved plant surveys on the Navajo Nation for a rangeland management project. Following that, he worked on several bird projects, including 2 seasons conducting burrowing owl surveys and a season conducting surveys for western yellow-billed cuckoo along the Colorado River. Love that river. His favorite job prior to moving into the consulting world was working for the Tohono O'odham Nation, where he was one of 2 people in charge of managing the plants and animals on a 2.8 million acre reservation in southern Arizona. That sounds like a dream job. He moved to San Diego in 2012, where he continued to broaden his experience in both plants and wildlife, working on a variety of projects in Southern California. He has worked for WRA's San Diego office since 2013, where in addition to wildlife work, has been involved in several long-term habitat restoration monitoring projects and has recently begun 2 bioacoustic projects involving long-term acoustic monitoring for bats and California gnatcatcher, where he will be using Wildnote to manage an array of recording devices over the course of the study. Welcome, Shawn Carrol.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, you. So I read another thing in your bio about that you conduct botanical surveys and vegetation mapping and classification based on National Vegetation Classification System standards. And I was just wondering if you could give me a little information about what that means, the National Vegetation Classification System.
Oh boy. I'll give you as much as I can understand.
Yeah.
The NVCS is meant to be a nationwide standard for, it's basically like a habitat taxonomy. So a lot like we have, for wildlife and plants, we have kingdom phyla. It's kind of a similar classification.
Okay.
And it can go down to the smallest 2 groupings would be the alliance level and then the association level. So the association would be the most specific. So it'd be kind of like the equivalent of like a species.
Okay, got it. Very interesting. So I'm a programmer by trade, and I think programming is hard until I ran into taxonomy. Taxonomy is hard. Why is taxonomy so hard, Shawn?
Because it's always changing. Biologists are constantly reevaluating species and reclassifying, putting things in different orders, giving them different names. So it can be pretty hard to keep up with.
Yeah.
Plants especially, I think the further along you get into plant studies, you realize that common names are useless because you can have the same common name for multiple different species of plants.
Right. Yeah.
And then you have smarties like Kristen Nelson, who goes out and does genetic stuff and finds a brand new plant and gets to name that, and that has to get incorporated.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Kristen.
Yeah.
No, go ahead, Shawn. Sorry.
I was just going to say, especially with new DNA technologies coming out, we're finding that a lot of species that we thought were the same plants are actually completely different plants.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I jumped ahead a little bit there because I'm so fascinated by this taxonomy subject. I will jump back now and ask you to get us started with a story from the field, any kind of crazy, amazing, beautiful, wonderful day that you had out in the field that you'd like to share with us.
I guess this would go back to one of my first consulting jobs, one of my first construction monitoring jobs. This was in the Sonoran Desert, probably 12 years ago, and part of my job was to relocate wildlife that were in the way of the bulldozer or ones that had fallen into trenches or holes overnight. So every morning I would have to go and check all the trenches and holes for wildlife, and people would call me, the construction workers would call me. I think on the second day on my job, I had to pull a Western diamondback out of a 6-foot hole, which was pretty interesting, especially because I was very new at it and had never actually handled a rattlesnake like that before. So it was pretty interesting. I think over the course of that job, I kept, as part of our notes, I went through and counted up all the wildlife that I had rescued or relocated, and I think over the course of about 3 months, the number was like 700 or 800.
Wow.
And a good 2/3 of those were Miriam's kangaroo rats. They never really learned that the same hole that was there last night that they fell into is going to still be there the next day. So there's a lot of repeats. But I remember the one day.
Time, Shawn. I think I never remember that same hole's there too.
Yeah, happens a lot in life.
Yeah.
Any scars?
I'm sorry?
Any scars, scratches, mars from those bites from those 400, 500 relocations?
Nope, nothing I remember. The only, the one day, the funniest story I have with that was I got a call and they told me that there was a baby javelina down in one of the holes. And, you know, I was about 20 minutes away. So I got in my truck and drove there. And the whole time I'm like, well, how the heck am I going to get this thing out? You know, and even if we get it out, it could be an orphan, you know, we don't know if the mother's around. Or, then I would think, well, if the mother is around, you don't want to mess with the mother javelina if you're between her and the baby, because they can be pretty vicious. So I'm getting there, I'm sweating, nervous. I finally look down into the hole and I realize that it's actually not a javelina, it's just a big cotton rat. So the one takeaway I took from there is that you never really know what you're going to find, no matter where you're at. Wildlife will turn up in unexpected places. And second one was that don't listen to the construction workers and their wildlife IDs. It's usually not going to be accurate.
Yeah, right.
Which brings us back to taxonomy is hard.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't know. Javelina and cotton rat, those are two pretty different animals.
I don't even know what a javelina is.
It's like a pig.
Javelinas, they're called collared peccaries. They're actually not, they're distantly related to pigs, but they're pretty similar.
Okay.
And they're
They
found
look like a pig.
Yeah, they're found in the Southwest, in the Sonoran Desert, and
Okay.
into, I think, South America. They're pretty wide ranging.
Right. That's great. All right. So let's get to, first I just wanted to look at, I had mentioned last week the WRA, and Shawn actually was one of our very first early adopters, and was looking into the history of WRA's activity on the platform. 46 projects, over 2,500 surveys submitted, over 8,000 photos uploaded, and over 1,000 reports exported. Yeah, that's a lot. And I just wanted to talk about, I think it was the Peterson Ranch Mitigation Bank I think, was that the first project that you used Wildnote on?
Yeah, I think so. I think that was at least the first large scale project.
Yeah, and that was, that's a mitigation banking project. Now, it seemed like the case study we wrote with you was really construction compliance around the restoration process. Is that right?
Yeah, that one was. Mm-hmm.
And then, so is there veg management during that process of the construction compliance?
Yes, as part of the mitigation banking process, it's usually a 5-year period. So each year we have to go out there and monitor. We do performance monitoring, so we take surveys within the field and take data on species and percentages and things like that. And then on top of that, we also there's a full-time maintenance staff out there who, they do all the weeding, herbicide spray, a lot of the restoration. That's what they're doing. So they've been, as part of their record keeping every day, they're using Wildnote to keep track of their activities.
Right. And are they actually utilizing taxonomy lists to keep track of their activities, or?
They're not.
Yeah.
But we are.
They're taking pictures and showing what they're doing and that sort of thing. Is that?
Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do have another project nearby in the Angeles National Forest that's a long-term, to have another habitat restoration project. And with that, we actually are going in and tracking species and things like that. And that has a potential to be a 10-year project, but if it actually goes that long, I'm not doing my job very well.
Okay.
So I think, it will probably be a 3 to 4 year project, but each month we're going out there and taking surveys, doing an inspection to see different issues that we're running into out there.
Mm-hmm. During the restoration process, basically making sure things are getting restored and staying restored. Is that right?
Yes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then do you have have to deal with invasive species cropping up a lot? Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Invasives are the main impediment to native plant restoration. So we try to really keep on top of that and manage the invasives before they get out of control.
Mm-hmm. And when you were faced with this project, these long-term projects, what kind of problems were you trying to solve by going to a digital tool like Wildnote?
Basically, we're trying to handle the issues that come with having paper notes. Paper is a pain. I, for one, am not real good at remembering to bring paper forms out in the field. You know, there's the potential of them getting lost. They can get just misplaced or accidentally thrown away. Not that I've ever done that before. But, and then at the end of the day, you know, we have to go through, and we used to have to go through and clean up the notes and try to translate other people's handwriting, which in the field handwriting is 10 times worse than, you know, your normal handwriting.
Right.
So it can get really hard to interpret what people are putting in their notes. Species, people tend to use different abbreviations for species, so that's another issue we run into.
Right.
So there's a lot of work at the end of the process that we had to come across or deal with, just basically in cleaning up everything, preparing it so it's in some readable form, you know. And with Wildnote, we don't have to do that. It's a quick run through the digital form, just basically for obvious mistakes, and then we're done. Yeah.
And I noticed, so Wildnote, we have these taxonomy lists that come through. You can just add to your survey. I think on your projects, you're doing both wildlife and plant observation.
Yeah, a lot of times.
So you'll have both questions in there. And then do you, what's the reporting that you're having to do on whatever plants and animals have been observed out on your projects? What kind of reporting do you have to do?
It depends by the project. Like for our Angeles National Forest project, each month I have a call with our client and the Forest Service botanist to kind of discuss each of the sites. So before that, I will export a report and send it to them, so we can they have time to look over it before the call. And then for this one, each quarter we have to write just a summary memo of all the activities and the performance monitoring standards and how we're meeting those. So I will use the Wildnote forms to inform that, the reports.
Right. And on those particular reporting, do you need to know, I'm guessing you need to know if the plant's native or invasive. Do you need to know if it's rare? Does that matter?
Yeah. Yes, it does.
Okay.
We usually don't run into rare plants in restoration areas, but it does happen occasionally.
Okay. All right. You get special points for that.
Yes, hopefully.
Right.
Get a gold star.
Great. Well, I wanted to open it up for questions. If anybody has questions about taxonomy or veg management, Nancy, are you tracking the questions for us?
Yeah, I am tracking the questions. Michael Kaplan sent in a question. He said, following is a quote from the Coastal Commission staff report for a hearing in which the commission declared, quote, Central Maritime Chaparral plant community to be an environmentally sensitive habitat, which must be avoided during wildfire fuel reduction work. The question is there a practical way that a homeowner can identify this plant community when they're creating defensible space to prepare for wildfires? So how would a homeowner actually do that?
Depending on their level of experience with plant identification, they can go to a couple different sources. CDFW and CMPS have some good sites. CMPS especially has an online version of the Manual of California Vegetation, which is California's version of the NVCS that we discussed earlier. So if you go into that, it probably won't. I think maritime is a more general classification. So they might have to do some digging, but the Manual of California Vegetation does have, what's it called? A crosswalk. So it will show you the different classification systems and where these fall into. So you're basically looking for the species that are found in those, in like the maritime scrub
Sure, yeah, chaparral, the
Chaparral,
maritime, yeah, central maritime chaparral.
Yeah. Yeah, so looking for species and then matching those with what would be on your property.
Can a homeowner actually get in trouble for removing species that are sensitive? Like that, like chaparral? I mean, how does that, that's interesting.
It depends. There's it is possible. Like even, you know, oak trees especially are protected. Each county has a tree ordinance. So it just depends on the type of vegetation community and the plants. And also it's, you know, it varies by local and state regulations.
Mm-hmm.
If we're talking about plant ID, isn't iNaturalist doing some pretty amazing work with their, take a picture and it will try to tell you what the species is? I think they're getting better and better at that because every picture they're learning more and more, essentially.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I haven't actually used the iNaturalist. I forget what that app is called. I haven't used that at all. I used a similar one called Plant Snap, and I found it to be kind of hit or miss. I think part of the problem there is that it's looking at a lot of horticultural plants as well. So there's just such a huge number. I think if you're able to localize it a lot more, I think that'd be pretty helpful, or choose like native plants or something like that. But that being said, I have had it correctly identify a number of native plants.
Mm-hmm. Megan O'Keefe chimes in. There's one called Seek that she said works really well.
That's it.
That's the iNaturalist app. It's called Seek.
Okay, it's the Seek by iNaturalist.
One thing that I noticed, which is almost even better than iNaturalist, you know, photo identifying, is the fact that there are a lot of professionals on iNaturalist, such as you and other botanists, and they tend to jump on and can look at a picture. So in terms of helping, that'd be a great tool for homeowners to use if they want to figure out what they have and actually just tap into the resources of the professionals through that app.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. Yeah, I was going to mention that iNaturalist is really good for the community plant ID. You know, you got thousands of people out there. Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're getting other, David Lee says iNaturalist work great. And then Stephanie Browner is saying that it's good to the family level, and anything more specific tends to be hit or miss. That's very interesting.
Right. Yeah, there are some species like the Cryptantha genus or any of those. I think they just recently split it to like 5 different genuses, but those ones you wouldn't be able to identify using any app. You have to actually like get a microscope out and look at the nutlets and different characteristics like that. So
is that when you call it keying the plant? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good segue for lumpers and splitters, Kristen. Where are we at with our poll, and what does that actually mean anyway?
Okay, so let's go first. This is a great segue into 2 things. First, we're going to go to apps, which we've kind of been talking about in terms of iNaturalist Seek. Shawn, are there any other go-to apps you use on your phone for your work that you rely on for your work?
There's one that I will use. It's called Southern California Wildflowers, and it's actually a whole suite of apps that they have that are either by region or state. So they have, you know, ones for Ohio, Nevada, Central California, and it lets you. Excuse me, I'm getting.
Oh, kitty!
It's not a Zoom call without an animal walking by. Yeah, so it will let you choose by location and date, and then you pick the different characteristics. So you can pick habitat, you pick how many petals the flower has, color, are the leaves opposite or alternate, you know, and then it will narrow it down. And I've had a lot of really good luck identifying species, identifying plants in the field using that one. And it's nice because it's kept up to date pretty well. And then it has links to a lot of different websites that you can get more information to kind of narrow down your search.
What was that called again? I'm going to put it in the chat.
It's called Southern California Wildflowers.
And they have
a whole, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great.
Yeah, it's on iOS. I'm not sure if it's on, it's probably on Android, I would think. But.
Okay. And now let's get to the most important topic. What the heck is a lumper and what the heck is a splitter? Shawn?
Lumpers are people who, well, let me go back. Let me start with splitters.
Okay.
Splitters are taxonomists who basically are, oh gosh, this is a hard question. I know I answered it earlier, but I can't now. They basically are looking at different species and trying to identify that or confirm that they're separate species. And then lumpers are kind of like, well, these ones are close enough, so we're going to throw them all together.
Kind of like at the family level sort of thing? Like?
No, at the species level.
At the species level.
I think the easiest one, like birds are probably the easiest example I could give. So their East Coast has the Baltimore Oriole, West Coast has the Bullock's Oriole. They're very closely related. There was a period about 30 years where they were lumped into the Northern Oriole. And then just recently in the past, gosh, I don't know, 10 years, 15 years, they decided through, different morphological studies or genetic studies that they were in fact separate species. So they were split again. So that happens quite a bit with birds. It's happening more and more with other species. Like I think there's been a push to get the Pacific tree frog split into 3 or 4 different species.
Right.
And then plants, you have millions of plants out there and there's different subspecies and varieties. So there's going to be a lot of changes.
Right.
As
is there an
technology,
advantage to, I'm sorry, is there an advantage to splitting versus lumping?
It depends who you ask.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's probably like a religious decision, Rainey, like how coders are with their programming language,
Yeah, and comments. You guys want to hear what the folks in the audience how they're answering the "Are you a lumper or splitter" question?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Do it.
So we've had great participation. Thank you, everybody. 84% of you voted. And looks like we got more lumpers than splitters. We got 44% lumpers, 20% splitters, and 36% have no idea what we're talking about. So maybe.
And now they do.
Yeah.
Rick Kaminsky chimed in and said, lumpers are generalists and splitters are taxa-specific people.
We got to shout out to Rick right now too, because they are winning 2020 on Wildnote, right?
Yeah.
They have the most surveys submitted of any other company with so many duck surveys. Yeah.
So the thing is, I'm guessing, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the splitters are the more OCD of the taxonomists.
That's great.
And probably naturally have better memories.
Yeah.
That's
Probably,
Yeah.
Or better eyes.
Well, so the next segment we lovingly call Kristen's Crazy Ideas. And basically, my idea this week is we've been going through the hard work of collecting as much taxonomy information as we can into our database so that our users can utilize it for their data collection and their reporting. We found those USDA plant lists, which are great. And then from there, we can get, sometimes it's called life form, sometimes something else, but like herb, tree, that kind of thing. Then we also have the whole taxonomy structure up to, the fact that it's a plant or an animal. And then we've got to go state by state to build up the native lists and the invasive lists and the rare lists. And so we've thought, once we get all this created, why don't we just create an API where any company could call our API and receive that data? So they would send a plant name, they would say, I'm in this state, and then they could retrieve back to them, all the metadata about that plant, basically. And would that be helpful to companies, say like larger companies that are building their own solutions, but maybe don't have that taxonomy framework in place in those solutions? Would it be helpful to have a general taxonomy API available to biologists to utilize as they need for their reporting?
Crazy Kristen, what's an API?
API is called an application programming interface, yawn, right? It basically means the ability to call programmatically, ask a question, kind of like Google, and then it will return to you an answer. And then you can take that data and put it into your database or into your reporting based on that answer. So if anyone has any thoughts out there, any of our participants that are in companies that, you know, how are you collecting all that metadata and how are you managing it, and would an API be useful to you? I'd love to hear from you.
We'd also love to hear from you if you have access to other, you know, lists for native species, invasive species for different states. I think we have in Virginia, California, and Washington right now with that additional metadata. So those of you who are on the call, if you've got, you could, you know, an Excel file with that information, that would be very helpful to us.
Yes, please send Excel, please, not PDF. No. And so the other thing, so we've been building out this taxonomy framework, and I'm just going to talk about some of the things we have in the framework that are really great. Like I said, we just have these built-in lists, plants and animals. You can search by Latin, scientific name, common name, or symbol. We also have the special species status for the flora and fauna. So basically, we've collected species or something like that. And then along the building of smaller lists, we also created this very cool feature called favorites. So once a plant's observed, it becomes a favorite and it stays at the top of the list for you to pick from, which really allows for faster data collection. So if you're repeatable observations of the same species, you can just click, 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 click. And then, of course, because we support the wetland forms, we've got the indicator status by region and all the other metadata. I also just wanted to do an announcement today. And this came from, we've been working closely with Shawn on this, and it's a species list export. So basically you can run it by date range and receive all of the species, whether plants or animals that have been observed out in your project, and we will bring down all the metadata into Excel, and then you can take it from Excel and do what you need to do for your final reporting. And I believe it's now 11:34, so you know, we're going to end this part of the webinar. But if you'd like to see that in action and our taxonomy framework in action, stick around for 2 more minutes, and Nancy will do a demo for you. But let me just think. Go ahead.
The giveaway too.
Go ahead, Rini.
A couple of things. I wanted to just put out the results of the second polling question, which was what percentage of your projects have a veg management component? Well, it's a tie between a quarter, 25% and 100%. And about even for none, 50 and 75%. So that's kind of interesting. It's either a little or a lot, or that's it.
All right. Great.
Got that there.
Thanks, Rini. Next Lunch and Learn is going to be with the podfather of archaeology, Chris Webster. If you want to know anything about digital cultural resource management, this is your guy. He is leading the charge in that industry to digitize this data. So he will be here to talk about that. He is an advisor to our company and a friend of ours as well, and one heck of an archaeologist. So if you would like to join us, that will be in 2 weeks. And I will now hand it over to Nancy to...
Is there a giveaway this week, Rini?
Yes, there is. Thanks for asking, Nancy. Real quick, if anybody has enjoyed this Lunch and Learn and would like to be on the chance for a power pack, so go out in the field, you won't lose power anymore with one of these. As well as everybody that enters gets a smudge away. Keep those glasses and mobile devices clean. So we'll send out a form in our thank you, and you can just sign up. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rini. Nancy?
Yes, okay, so a little bit about taxonomy, and we're going to demo the latest export. And so I think this is even your first time seeing it, Shawn, maybe. So I'm going to share my screen here. And all right, so we're in a little demo environment right now with some data that is right now. Ultimately, we'll be able to do a taxonomy export both for plants and animals. Right now, in our alpha state, we're just doing animals.
Plants.
So, I mean, sorry, just plants. Thank you. So, what you're looking at right now is the projects window of Wildnote. If you've never seen it before, I think many of you on the call have. And within a project, we have the setup, which is project admin, and then project data, which is all the collected survey data. So if you've gone out and collected a bunch of data, and within your particular survey form, you have a taxonomy list that you've tapped into, or you've been collecting taxon data, then you'll now be able to export specifically, as Kristen mentioned, just a taxonomy export with all collected data. So to do that, you come into the export window and come into our Pro Plus exports, and it's a species list export. And from here, you would select the template that you're going to be exporting on. So I'm going to click this veg monitoring, a couple of these vegetation monitoring reports, because I know those have data. Enter date range. Let me change this to 18. And so we'll do a big date range. And then you would pick plant or animal. And right now, animal is grayed out. And then preview the report. And so in just a second, we'll get a preview of what this looks like. So you can see that we're now listing family, scientific name, common name, native status, the form, if there's a listing status or invasive status, and then the wetland indicator status. And what we've chosen to do is allow you to export this to Excel directly. So we'll run it through to there. And that way you can manipulate it as you need it for your own report. So we'll go into our exported reports.
What we noticed was when we were getting examples from our customers of what their species export looked like, they all seemed to be very, very different from each other. And so we decided to try to give all the data into Excel, and then that way you could take that Excel file and manipulate it to the format that you wanted. We would love to work cross-company to come up with a format for both wildlife and plants that everyone would just be happy with, and they wouldn't have to post-process or manipulate. It would just be done for them. That's our final goal we want. We don't want you to have to post-process or manipulate the data after you bring it out of Wildnote. That's kind of the big dream. We hope one day to be able to do that.
So Nancy, this report then would show any species that was identified during a project for the date range that you picked. Is that correct?
That is correct. So
and
it's not.
Is there ever a count? Like
I was going to say, it's not a count. It's each species seen.
You know, that it seems like a count would be. What do you think about that, Shawn? You need a count on this?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah.
Chime in for folks who are still on the call with us if you have instances where you would need a count. There's someone in chat. Hi, how often is the wetland indicator status updated? So great question, Beth. We have been paying attention to what's been happening with the Corps, and they just released the 2018 updates, which was actually less plants than I thought, and we have updated the database to reflect that. So it's updated as often as the Corps releases their new information.
Yeah.
Is there anything else we should be paying attention to besides that for you professionals who are on the call with us? So that's that piece. Now let me show you.
Nancy.
Sorry?
Yeah, I was just going to mention on the wildlife side, the CDFW special animals list was just updated earlier this month. I looked through it and I can't find any differences from the year before. I'm sure they're in there, but at least for vertebrates. But you might want to keep an eye on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Samantha would like to know, we have a couple of chime-ins for species count. Samantha would like to know if we show CNPS, state and federal listings. We show California. Kristen, you answer this question because I know you know the database much more specifically than I do.
CNPS is California Native Plant Society, I believe. And that is probably where we got the native, non-native data in column D. So that would be there. And then the state and federal would be under column F under listing status. And I don't know if we have any in this example, but what you often will end up seeing is something like CA threatened, comma, federal threatened, right?
Yeah.
So if it was
Yeah.
both threatened or endangered in state, the current state you're in, and federal, you would see like a comma delimited listing of all the listings of that plant.
Right, exactly. Let me show really quickly the back end of a survey form and the choices that are available. Actually, I don't need to go there. I'll show it over here. So you guys can kind of get an idea of what the taxon is that is available. So here's the Wildnote taxon list library. And Rini, could you watch chat?
Yeah, I just did want to chime in that Tom Mayer said that the only time a count might be nice is if you find a rare species, or at least be able to flag a known rare species.
Okay, good to know.
And
There's a
then
couple more
Natalie
chats.
Levine said, also I use for wildlife observation type feces footprint direct site. I'm not sure I'm putting together what that refers to.
Feces would be like, I saw their poop, I saw their footprint, or I saw that actual animal. So what kind of observation?
Oh, so if we had this species output for animals, that would be additional columns.
Yeah, what kind of observation it was. That's really interesting, Natalie. Thank you for that. Charlie wants us to put synonyms in this thing. That would be easy.
Oh, interesting. I was wondering about that, Charlie. Thanks for chiming in on that.
Yeah.
I'm kind of just leaving this up on the screen for you folks to look at. You can see you're actually seeing custom lists in here as well. But you can, in fact, let me change that. I'm going to stop my share for just a sec, Kristen.
Okay. Yeah, so she's showing all of the various taxonomy lists that we've created. And usually how this works is customers come to us and say, hey, I want the British Columbia plant list. And we say, all right, let's do this. You need to help us find it, the official list, and we will get it imported into our system. And it's quite a project, actually. Weirdly, things are spelled slightly differently. There might be like a period after SSP, or it might be a var, or just various things that we've found. It takes us time to get it clean and in the list and within our framework that would work. But we're happy to do it, especially if you can help us find that data. Because like I said, we want to create this big database for everyone to use.
Right.
What do you mean by count? Do you mean frequency of occurrence, abundance? We sample wetland vegetation to determine spatial coverage and biomass to calculate waterfowl foraging capacity. So I think in this we meant number of observations. I believe that's what count would have meant there. But like I know in the wetland work and in the wetland delineation forms, there is a field for % cover, which is slightly different there. That might be kind of abundance, what he means by abundance there. And then Samantha says, sorry, I mean CRPR, no CNPS. So the California Rare Plant Ranking. Yeah, so we do plan to get the rare plant information in as we get that data and add that to this report.
I love this question from Natalie, because I've been trying to connect with Natalie for several weeks. I believe she is in Israel or Palestine, and our time zones just aren't working. But of course, she wants to know, is it possible to add the Israeli-Palestinian plant list as well? And the answer is always yes, if you can help us find that data, correct?
Yep, get it to us
in Excel.
In an Excel format. Yep, we can get it in there. Definitely.
And Natalie, I do hope to talk to you soon in person.
Fantastic.
And Zoom person.
Hey, well, we had 45 people stay for the demo, so that's pretty great. That's like, I think we had about 50 total.
60 maybe?
In the beginning. Okay, yeah. So thanks a lot for sticking around, folks.
Nancy, I think you've earned your crown as demo goddess now.
I don't think so. I was hoping to get in and actually show a couple more things
Go for it, Nancy. Yeah.
On there. So
you gotta share your screen again.
Yeah, I will. I'm just getting in here. Hang on one second. Gosh darn it. I keep getting into a funny, Kristen, why don't you pop in? I keep getting into a funny state here. I apologize.
Okay, what do you want me to do?
Well, go over to the taxonomy under settings.
Okay.
And I was trying to get out of our super user mode because I think it's confusing. So, and by the way, Nick Rigoli, who's been working on this, one of our developers, says we have 56,000 entries in our taxonomy database at this point.
Wow. Yeah.
So
what are you trying to show, Nancy? What are you trying to show?
So I just wanted to show folks where taxonomy lives. I think it's kind of a hidden feature for some of the people who are on the call already using this. Under settings, if you're a company admin,
all right,
go over to both your taxon list library where you can build your own taxon, and then you can see a list of all the taxonomy that we have. You can see things by native status, listing status, wetland indicator status.
So we have this ability to basically build your own list. So you would name the list, describe what you're doing. It would be owned by your own company. And then you would basically go in and pick one by one the taxonomy that you want in that list. And that's a great process for maybe up to 20 species. If you have a list of say 500 and you don't want to have to go one by one, you can give that to us in Excel. We'll go ahead and upload that for you to save you that extra time of going one by one. The other really cool thing I want to talk about is this role that we give certain people. It's called taxonomy super user, because we know that the data is not perfect or complete when we get it. We would give you the ability to update that data because we trust you as a taxonomy super user. You know what you're doing, and you would be actually updating the data for the whole system, right? So that would be essentially crowdsourcing the data to make it better for everyone.
Yeah. And we have some comic relief from Charlie Newling. I'm so happy. Thank you, Charlie. Here it is. A neighbor told me she had a dream that she was swimming in an ocean of oranges.
Orange soda.
Orange soda. It was a real Fanta. Thanks, Charlie.
All right, Charlie.
A true wetland lover of the wetlands.
Taking us out with a joke, Charlie. Good job. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. If you would like to get a demo from Rini and or Jessica, you can come to our website, schedule a demo. We'd be happy to show you the other features of the platform. Like I said, this is the one and only thing built just for environmental consultants. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, Shawn. We sure appreciate you joining us. Appreciate it.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you, Shawn. You're the best.